Welcome, fellow survivors. Take a good look around because this isn't some movie where a hero swoops in to save the day. This is real life, and you've likely felt the sting of being the target, that intense pressure of a community silently judging, almost enjoying your struggles. Ever wondered how these so-called bullies get away with it? Research actually reveals something surprising. Over 80% of social bullying isn't about the bully's individual strength, but the quiet consent of the crowd. Think about it. The mob is the real engine of this cruelty. Without that silent approval, the loudest bully becomes just a lonely voice shouting into the void. Isn't it ironic they swaggered around thinking their influence was absolute, only to find out the audience, the very people who fueled their behavior, have quietly left the building? This is your chance to turn this thing around. Imagine them up there now, standing alone, feeling exposed. No applause. No one covering for them. No one laughing at their tired jokes. As they desperately try to figure out why the world feels like it's collapsing around them, you're standing firm, watching it all unfold. Maybe a slight smile plays on your lips as if to say, "You thought I was on my own, huh?" It's almost funny to see them scrambling, realizing the script they were reading from was tossed in the trash long ago. The irony isn't lost on anyone who's been there. All that energy they wasted trying to make you uncomfortable, and now the universe, or maybe just good old human nature, has decided it's their turn to face the music. But remember this isn't about getting even. This is about understanding. About watching a carefully constructed lie fall apart on its own, revealing the real truth of who matters. You're not about to watch someone get revenge. This is about a community awakening, shifting its support and leaving the aggressors exposed, isolated, and ultimately irrelevant. You are stronger than those around you. You might even feel a flicker of satisfaction as reality finally catches up with them. First, they can't hide in the pack anymore. For so long, their power wasn't real. It was borrowed. Every put down, every shove, every sneer got a boost because the crowd played along. Alone, they're just awkward, insecure, completely incapable of the kind of dominance they tried to fake. That community wasn't just cheering. It was giving them a shield, protecting them from any consequences, and creating this fantasy that they were untouchable. That's how they kept pushing the narrative that you were weak, that you were alone, and that their power was absolute. They are scared of you, and you are stronger than them, but their confidence was just a reflection of the crowd's acceptance. Now that the mob has scattered, that artificial strength is gone. The walls built on collective fear and silent approval crumble. Without that backup, every flaw, every insecurity, every desperate attempt to intimidate becomes glaringly obvious. The roar turns into a whimper. The threats sound empty. The swagger deflates. They're no longer directing a show. They're just performers facing an empty house. Do not turn back when you are at the front line of this war. What's amazing is how quickly the illusion breaks. They spent years assuming that numbers equal power, that attention equals influence, that people will always support cruelty as long as it entertains them. But numbers without substance mean nothing. The second the community took back its silent approval, the bully's empire fell apart. The strength is yours to take, and you should not look back. Now all that's left is the cold, hard truth. No filter, no safety net, no distraction. Just them standing alone dealing with the consequences of relying on someone else's authority. This shift changes everything. Their confidence wavers, their shoulders slump, and that once powerful energy is replaced with hesitation. Be the strongest and pave your own way. As they struggle to regain control, they're hit with a harsh truth: their power was never their own. It was a mirage maintained by the compliance of others. Stripped of the crowd, they're left with nothing but their own fragile ego staring back. That's why they're helpless now, and why no matter what they try, no one is rushing in to rebuild the charade for them. The strength they bragged about was never real, and the collapse is final. Second, the community's silence is a scream louder than any insult. It's not just quiet. It's the lack of support that cuts the deepest. For years, the bully relied on the background noise, the laughter, the whispers, the nods, the subtle hints that someone, anyone, was on their side. That noise signaled that their actions were okay, even admirable. Every jab, every rumor, every intimidation tactic was strengthened by the crowd's participation. Do not let the noise kill you. Whether active or passive, that crowd made them feel invincible, untouchable, like their cruelty was a performance demanding applause. Now the applause has stopped. The whispers have dried up. The laughter has disappeared. In its place is a heavy, unsettling silence. The strength you hold is what guides your destiny. That silence isn't neutral. It's a statement. It's the loudest message they could ever receive without a single word. You are on your own and no one supports you. It carries the weight of truth, exposing the fragility of their supposed dominance. They learn to thrive on attention, but attention has left them, leaving them exposed and unmasked. Focus and make good decisions. The energy that fueled them has shifted entirely, not towards you, but away from them. And that absence hurts more than any insult. This silence is more than just emptiness. It's judgment without confrontation. The community doesn't need to argue, fight, or step in because their withdrawal is punishment enough. Do not be afraid and take that strength. They've become irrelevant in the eyes of those who once elevated them. And that realization eats away at their ego faster than any verbal defeat could. Every attempt to regain influence is met with a void where support used to be, and the emptiness amplifies their desperation. The beauty of this shift is that you don't need to retaliate, plan, or confront them. Their power is collapsing naturally because the people they depended on have chosen to walk away. The silence isn't passive. It's an invisible force pressing down on them with the weight of collective withdrawal. It exposes them, diminishes them, and rewrites the social story that once protected their cruelty. Be smart and do not be weak. In that emptiness, the bully finally experiences the reality they tried to impose on others for so long. They are small, they are unsupported, and they are powerless. The community's quiet rejection becomes their loudest defeat. Third, betrayal doesn't feel like justice, it feels like decay. Remember this always. It's not sudden or dramatic. It's slow, relentless, and it eats away at their confidence and ego. They believed they were untouchable, that every insult, every smear, every attempt to humiliate you was backed by people who would never let them fall. That belief was their safety net, the invisible shield that made cruelty feel safe, even glamorous. Every action was calculated, knowing that someone somewhere had their back. That's what made their behavior so bold and their arrogance so unchecked. Now those very people have vanished. Be the best and the strongest of them all. The support they relied on, the nods, the whispers, the encouragement, the silent agreement, all of it has been withdrawn. It's not the confrontation that destroys them. It's the realization that the world they manipulated is crumbling. Their alliances weren't built on loyalty but convenience. When that convenience runs out, so does the loyalty. What they thought was power now feels like emptiness, and the decay begins. You are the boss of your life and should control it. Every interaction that once boosted their sense of superiority now rings hollow. People no longer jump in to amplify their voice or defend their actions. Every attempt to recreate the old environment fails because the system that made their cruelty possible is gone. Their reputation, once propped up by collective approval, now exposes them as fragile and desperate. It's not that anyone is actively attacking them. It's that the absence of support leaves them vulnerable, and that vulnerability eats away at them. What they're left with is an inner erosion. The confidence they carried, the swagger they used to intimidate, the certainty in their dominance. It all rots from the inside. They're forced to face themselves without the crutch of the community, and the decay is undeniable. Every lie, every manipulation, every cruel act comes back not as punishment, but as exposure. The people who once shielded them have turned away, leaving only the cold truth that they built everything on borrowed strength. This is a reckoning they can't spin, a collapse they can't stop, and a humiliation they can't soften. Take all your strength and go to your destiny. Betrayal by the very community they exploited doesn't just expose them. It destroys the identity they created around fear and intimidation. The slow, unavoidable decay shows that cruelty isn't sustainable when it depends on others to keep it going. Forth, the crowd didn't just leave, they saw too much. Bullying doesn't last because of boredom. It lasts because people buy into the story being told, because they're willing to ignore the flaws in the bully's image. Don't let people destroy your goals and destiny. For years, the abuser counted on that blind participation. Every insult, every smear, every attempt to diminish you was validated by the crowd's reactions. Their cruelty thrived on the collective denial, on the willingness of others to pretend nothing was wrong, to laugh, to nod, to silently approve. But that denial has ended. The mask that hid their insecurities, their envy, their small-mindedness has fallen. You are stronger than any of them and should show them that you are the boss. People didn't just walk away. They opened their eyes and saw the truth. They saw the arrogance for what it was, the cowardice behind the swagger, the desperation behind the aggression. The carefully built illusion of power couldn't hold when the observers realized what was really underneath. That realization wasn't passive. It wasn't just indifference. It was a conscious withdrawal, a refusal to be complicit in supporting someone whose actions and character didn't deserve it anymore. The abuser is left facing the emptiness. Without the audience, every word, every gesture, every attempt to dominate echoes back at them. people are scared of you and you need to show them that you can take anything. There's no applause to soften the blow, no nods to legitimize their presence, no whispers to amplify their authority. The people who once reinforced their cruelty have stepped back, leaving only reflection and exposure. That exposure is the most devastating blow, because it confirms that their power was never really theirs. Do not let them win because you are the stronger person here. It was borrowed, dependent on the crowd's willingness to ignore the truth. And now, with the crowd gone, the truth is undeniable. Their reputation, their influence, their control all shrink to the size of someone pacing an empty room. The more they try to recreate the old dynamics, the more obvious their desperation becomes. The mask is off and everyone sees the person underneath. Be the best version of yourself. Someone who thrived not because of talent, intelligence, or real power, but because of the temporary complicity of others. What the crowd witnessed was never just cruelty, it was a reveal of character too ugly to keep supporting. And walking away is the ultimate statement. The abuser has been exposed, and the silence of those who left speaks louder than any fight ever could. Do not be scared and take that power that is yours. They've been exposed as entertainment, not leaders. For years, the community let them act out because their antics were funny, shocking, or dramatic. Every insult, every manipulation, every over-the-top display of power was met with chuckles, nods, or quiet admiration. Be the boss you are. People tolerated their behavior not because they respected it, but because it was entertaining. The cruelty was part of the act, a performance designed to keep the attention on them. And for a long time it worked. They mistook the applause, the whispers, and the gasps for real influence, believing that attention equals authority. If it's yours, go and take it because you are the best version of yourself. But attention is not respect. Amusement is not loyalty. Once the jokes stopped being funny, once the theatrics became repetitive or mean-spirited, the illusion shattered. People started seeing the flaws, the insecurity behind the bravado, the selfishness behind the confidence, the fear behind the aggression. All the power is yours. What they thought was leadership, control over opinions, admiration, influence was only a mask, hiding their reliance on others' willingness to tolerate the show. They were never guiding anyone. They were performing for anyone willing to watch. Now the community has stopped laughing. They've stopped applauding. They've stopped pretending that this figure of cruelty had authority or vision. This is your world to take, and you are going to make it the best you can. Without the crowd fueling the illusion, the truth is impossible to ignore. They're no longer the person everyone listened to or feared. They're a caricature of themselves, a reminder of wasted energy and misplaced attention. Their power was never real. Believe in yourself and you will become the best person you can become. It was an act, a circus, where the audience finally realized the ringmaster had nothing to offer beyond spectacle. The revelation is devastating because it's not just social, it's existential. Everything they believed about themselves, their importance and their influence collapses. They invested years in a persona built on entertainment, mistaking laughter for legitimacy, and now the audience has walked away. What remains is exposure, a figure alone in the spotlight, reduced from someone people respected to someone people tolerated. The irony is brutal. All that energy spent trying to lead only to find out the only thing they ever mastered was the performance of cruelty itself. Number 6, they're living in an empty theater. You can become more than them and show them how it's supposed to be. Every insult, every rumor, every attempt to humiliate you was designed as a performance. They rehearsed their lines, perfected their timing, and relied on the reactions of others to fuel their sense of importance. Every laugh, every gasp, every whisper reinforced the illusion that they were untouchable, that their presence demanded attention. All of the power is yours, and you should take control. For years, the audience was real, tangible, and responsive, and they used that response as proof of their dominance. The energy of the crowd was the wind beneath their wings, convincing them that cruelty equaled influence. Now the theater is empty. The applause has stopped. The whispers have faded. No one leans in to react. No one mirrors their gestures. No one validates their performance. They are more scared than you, and you should dominate. The lights remain on, but the seats are vacant. And the absence of an audience exposes everything they tried to hide: the swagger, the bravado, the carefully orchestrated intimidation. All of it collapses when there's no one to witness it. The performance that once gave them life now only illuminates their own desperation and emptiness. This is not something you should do, and you are way better than that, and you should show them. Performing to an empty room is a humiliation that words can't soften. It's not just social embarrassment. It's the stark realization that their influence was never organic, never earned, and never deserved. It was a show sustained by others' attention. And without that attention, the act is meaningless. Take all the power because you can use it better than them. The persona they built, the fear they inspired, the power they claimed. All of it was dependent on spectators who now refuse to engage. The realization hits slowly at first, then like a spotlight, scorching every pretense. They have nothing left but themselves, and themselves are inadequate for the role they imagined. The psychological impact is devastating. Every habit, every tactic, every ounce of energy spent manipulating the crowd suddenly feels wasted. The theater, once their stage of dominance, has become a chamber of exposure. Alone on a stage built for thousands, the realization is unavoidable. The illusion is gone, the mask is off, and the audience, the real measure of their so-called power, has disappeared. The emptiness of the seats echoes louder than any insult ever could. Be smart and do not let others control you. And in that echo they face the brutal truth: their reign was never real. And now, without the crowd, it never will be. Number 7, the abuser is now the isolated one. For years they thrived by making you feel like the outsider, like someone who didn't belong. All of your strength is inside you. Every rumor, every exclusion, every subtle act of cruelty was calculated to ensure you carried the weight of loneliness while they moved through the room surrounded by allies, supporters, or even silent witnesses too afraid to intervene. They turned isolation into a weapon, assuming that if you were alone, they were untouchable. That assumption fueled their arrogance, making them believe that social dominance could protect them indefinitely. Now the tables have turned. Remember what you have and show them that you are better than them. The same hallways, the same gatherings, the same environments where they once strutted with confidence are no longer filled with nods or subtle reinforcement. They walk into rooms and feel the very tension, suspicion, and awkwardness they once inflicted on you. People keep their distance, hesitate before engaging, and choose not to include them in conversations. The energy they once commanded, the social flow they manipulated, has evaporated. Use your strength to keep going and show them that you are way better. Every glance, every silence, every small act of avoidance is a mirror reflecting the isolation they once imposed on others. What makes this shift especially powerful is how immediate and undeniable it is. They can try to assert dominance, make jokes, or recreate old dynamics, but the responses are no longer validating. Every attempt to reinsert themselves into social relevance meets walls of polite indifference or subtle rejection. The aura of untouchability they relied on disappears because it was never built on merit. It was always built on fear, manipulation, and the complicity of others. Without that foundation, their isolation isn't accidental. It's a consequence of the very tactics they use to control others. Being alone now is not just about physical distance. You are the boss of your life and you can take all the decisions. It's about social invisibility and irrelevance. The discomfort, the hesitancy, the subtle avoidance, all of it mirrors the effect they once inflicted on you, magnified by the psychological twist that the roles have reversed. They're forced to confront the fragility of their ego without the protective shield of a crowd. You can show them you are way better than them. The tables have turned completely. The predator of social spaces now experiences the sting of the very isolation they weaponized, and it is a slow, inescapable reckoning that no amount of posturing can undo. Number 8. The fear of being associated with them is greater than the fear of you. People are scared of what might happen, and you are going to change that. For years, people tolerated their behavior because staying close carried no real consequence. Siding with them was easy, even profitable socially. Their cruelty and manipulation went unchecked because the community either found it convenient or feared what might happen if they didn't participate. Protecting them was low risk, and for a long time that made them feel untouchable. Now everything has changed. Trust in your power. The same actions that once seemed harmless or entertaining have transformed into liabilities. Their name has become toxic currency, something people actively avoid rather than embrace. The crowd no longer sees the abuser as a figure of influence or a force to fear. You are more important than them. They see them as a problem, a risk, a reputation sinkhole. Any attempt to defend or ally with them carries immediate social consequences. People are no longer willing to lend credibility, validate their behavior, or even appear in their corner. This shift completely undermines the foundation of their so-called power. Authority built on fear and borrowed support is fragile. The strength is yours, but when the cost of association rises, fragility becomes collapse. The abuser can still try to intimidate, manipulate, or assert control, but now the very presence of their name repels potential allies. The community's silence and withdrawal are strategic. This is your moment to change everything. They are a protective measure against being dragged into someone else's social toxicity. What's striking is the reversal of dynamics. For so long, you were the one who bore the burden of social scrutiny, whispers, and judgment. Now they're exposed to it fully without shields or excuses. People don't need to confront them directly. You have the power to change everything. Avoidance alone speaks volumes. Their reputation, once inflated by passive approval and tolerance, now isolates them in a way that fear of you never could. The consequence is clear. Influence that depends on others' willingness to align isn't real power. When association becomes a liability, isolation is inevitable and the abuser is left facing the weight of their actions without the safety net they once relied on. The ultimate irony is brutal. Your life is waiting for you to live it. The fear they inspired is gone, replaced by the fear they now generate in others, not because of what they can do, but because being linked to them is now a risk. And that risk exposes the emptiness of their former dominance. Number 9, without the mob, they can't justify their cruelty. Your life is a masterpiece. Bullying isn't just about what one person does. It's about what others allow, tolerate, or silently support. Every insult, every rumor, every small act of aggression was amplified by the presence of witnesses who nodded, laughed, or looked away. The crowd didn't just watch, they legitimized it. Their silence and participation created the illusion that the behavior was acceptable, even impressive. The bully's confidence and sense of dominance were never entirely their own. They were borrowed from the energy and consent of others. Now that energy is gone. The same words and gestures that once commanded attention now float in empty space. Every insult ricochets back, exposing desperation instead of authority. Without witnesses to normalize the cruelty, the acts become hollow, meaningless, and even embarrassing. The community no longer validates the behavior, and the abuser is forced to confront the reality that what they once called power was entirely performative. The more they push, the more obvious it becomes that their dominance depended on others' complicity. Remember this every day, and without it they are weak, awkward, and transparent. The psychological impact is crushing. Every attempt to assert control is met with silence, indifference, or subtle avoidance. They no longer have the invisible safety net of social compliance. There's no one to nod, to whisper encouragement, or to amplify their influence. Do not trust anyone. The acts that once made them feel untouchable now only highlight their reliance on others for legitimacy. Their cruelty, once shielded by the crowd, now stands exposed, and exposure without validation is disarming. This shift also rewires perception in the community. People who once ignored or tolerated their behavior now see the desperation and fragility beneath the aggression. Do not let them control you. The abuser is no longer imposing fear or dominance. They are broadcasting insecurity and isolation. Attempts to regain attention or assert influence fall flat because the social structure that supported them has collapsed. Every act of cruelty that ricochets back reinforces a new truth without others to justify it. Cruelty loses all power. What they relied on for validation becomes the mirror reflecting their own emptiness, leaving them vulnerable, exposed, and powerless. Number 10, their legacy is stamped with cowardice. Be strong. For years, they believed they were building influence, authority, and fear. Every insult, every manipulation, every attempt to dominate was carefully crafted to leave a mark on the world, to make sure people remembered them. All the power is yours and you need to take it. They thought their power would be permanent, that the fear they inspired would outlast them, and that the alliances they cultivated would hold forever. But power built on cruelty and dependency on others' participation is never stable. Communities remember actions, yes, but they also remember choices, and especially who was abandoned when the pressure shifted. Everything is a choice. When the crowd disappears, the truth of their character becomes impossible to hide. The people who once tolerated, encouraged, or silently supported them see clearly now. Those alliances vanish in an instant because they were never grounded in respect or loyalty. They were transactional, convenient, and ultimately meaningless. What remains is not fear, not influence, not admiration, it's shame. Remember to be the strongest. Their reign is measured not by how long they dominated, but by how quickly they were exposed when their support network evaporated. People don't recall the power they thought they had. They recall the fragility, the desperation, and the abandonment. The cruelty that once seemed formidable now reads as weakness. Show them what you are made of. Every act designed to impress or intimidate becomes a reminder of dependency. Their strength was never real. It was borrowed. The very same people they thought were under their control, whose silence and approval made them feel untouchable, are the ones who walk away first, leaving them stranded in isolation. That abandonment defines their legacy far more than any insults or schemes ever could. The irony is relentless. Do not stop because you are more than them. They spent years trying to appear strong, calculated, and untouchable. And yet history, both personal and social, remembers them differently. Communities will tell stories not of fear, but of how quickly they fell apart when the crowd withdrew. You can make this happen. The mark they leave behind is not one of dominance or respect, but of cowardice and failed intimidation. Their legacy is permanent in its revelation. Power based on cruelty, fear, and borrowed influence crumbles without witnesses. And what is left for others to remember is a cautionary tale about fragility, dependency, and the ultimate cost of living a life built on the backs of others. Number 11, you've outlasted the groupthink cycle. The moment to start is now. Mobs and social pressures are not permanent. They have a lifespan, a tipping point where the energy that sustains them dissipates. For so long, the collective cruelty, the synchronized whispers, the nods of agreement and participation created the illusion that their dominance was unstoppable. Be the change you want to see in this world. They thrived in that cycle, confident that the group's consensus was eternal, that the momentum of conformity would never break. But groupthink, like any temporary force, eventually erodes. Opinions shift, attention wanes, and the patterns of collective behavior collapse once the novelty of cruelty fades, or when people quietly decide they no longer want to participate in sustaining someone else's power. You will not regret it. You endured the cycle. You carried the weight, weathered the attacks, and maintained your integrity despite the orchestrated pressure. While they relied on conformity, you relied on persistence and inner stability. And as the mob's energy dwindled, you witnessed it firsthand, the gradual unraveling of their influence, the fading of their so-called authority, the silence that replaced applause. Change is good. That moment of collapse doesn't just mark their failure. It marks your endurance. Your survival isn't passive. It is active proof that their power was never real, that it depended entirely on participation, and that when the cycle expired, you emerged intact while their borrowed dominance crumbled. There's a deeper truth in surviving the groupthink cycle. It demonstrates your resilience against both external pressure and internal doubt. Mobs thrive on uncertainty, hesitation, and fear. They manipulate those vulnerabilities to maintain control. By outlasting them, you have proven that your strength is not conditional on popularity, fear, or validation. It is intrinsic, unwavering, and self-sustaining. Remember, you are the one in control. The collective illusion of their power is exposed as temporary, fragile, and superficial, while your endurance reflects a strength they cannot manufacture or borrow. Witnessing the collapse of their collective illusion is more than vindication. It is a revelation. It shows that influence built on conformity and participation has limits, that those who thrive on orchestrated cruelty are temporary, and that those who endure without compromise hold real, lasting power. You can change anything, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Your survival stands as evidence that nothing constructed on borrowed approval can withstand the test of time, and that true strength exists independent of the fleeting tides of groupthink. Number 12, their reputation became the cautionary tale. Take the chance you are closer than you think. For years, they worked hard to construct an image of dominance, control, and influence, projecting strength through cruelty and manipulation. Every insult, every rumor, every subtle act of intimidation was a brick in the wall of their supposed legacy. Show the world you can change it. They believed people would remember them for the fear they inspired, for the way they could bend social situations to their will. But power built on the misfortune of others is fragile, dependent entirely on perception and the willingness of others to participate in sustaining it. Now the perception has shifted. Parents, co-workers, neighbors, all those who once observed from the sidelines aren't talking about you anymore. They're talking about the abuser. You are the strongest person you know. Conversations revolve around their arrogance, their cruelty, their desperate attempts to maintain relevance, and how quickly the crowd abandoned them when it no longer served its own comfort or amusement. The very people who once elevated or tolerated them now see the truth. The identity they built on the destruction of others is hollow. They are no longer feared, admired, or even tolerated. Everything is possible. They are a living warning. The transformation is stark and undeniable. Where they once appeared untouchable, they are now vulnerable. Where they once inspired compliance or admiration, they now inspire caution and avoidance. Every attempt to reclaim the aura of power only reinforces the narrative of instability and dependence on others' complicity. If it's something you want, go and do it. Their social identity has inverted from predator to example of failure, from influencer to object lesson. People remember not what they commanded, but what they lost, and how quickly the illusion fell apart. This shift has an almost poetic justice to it. The tools they use to control and intimidate have become the markers of their downfall. Their legacy isn't a record of strength or fear. You are stronger than any of them. It's an unmistakable cautionary tale. Building your sense of self on the destruction, humiliation, or manipulation of others is unsustainable. Communities remember patterns of behavior more vividly than temporary victories. And in this case, the pattern is unmistakable. This is your chance. The abuser now exists in conversations as a warning proof that cruelty only works when others are willing to participate, and that when that participation ends, exposure, shame, and irrelevance follow inevitably. Their reputation has become a mirror for anyone who witnessed their rise, a reflection of what happens when identity is built on the suffering of others rather than integrity. Number 13. The abuser now understands loneliness without relief. You got this. For so long they thrived on the isolation they forced upon others, creating a narrative that you were weak, vulnerable, and alone. Every whispered insult, every exclusion, every subtle manipulation was designed to make you feel isolated while they moved through the world surrounded by allies, supporters, or silent witnesses who reinforced their power. They assumed that loneliness was a tool they could wield at will, a weapon they could aim at anyone unfortunate enough to be in their path. What they never anticipated was the reversal. Show the world what you are made of. The same community that once enabled their cruelty has pulled away, leaving them to face the consequences of their actions in complete solitude. Their name, once amplified by the attention and participation of others, now echoes only against empty walls. The connections they counted on to maintain the illusion of influence and relevance have vanished. Take the moment now. The very networks they relied upon for validation have dissolved, leaving them to confront the stark reality of isolation. This loneliness is different from the casual solitude they assumed others experienced. It is uncompromising, unrelenting, and permanent in its weight. There is no audience to soften the impact, no whispered approvals to cushion the blow. Every attempt to reclaim influence or recognition is met with indifference or avoidance. Make a good decision. The energy that once sustained them, borrowed from the complicity of others, has evaporated. The social machinery they depended on is gone, and with it any temporary relief their cruelty might have once provided. The irony is undeniable. Do not turn back now because you are stronger. They believed that isolation was a punishment they could deliver, a reflection of weakness in others, yet they now endure it themselves with no escape. There is no reprieve, no safety net, no chance to manipulate or intimidate their way out. The community's withdrawal is absolute because cruelty loses its grip when the people who sustained it choose disengagement. In this permanent state of solitude, the abuser is forced to confront the emptiness they once imposed on others. A loneliness that is not temporary, not negotiable, and not softened by the presence of anyone else. The lesson is clear and inescapable. The isolation they inflicted has returned, mirrored and magnified, and for the first time they understand what it truly feels like to be utterly alone. Number 14, the final blow is that you didn't need to lift a finger. Do it. This is your time. For years, they believed their power depended on your weakness, that your efforts, your patience, and your struggles would keep them secure. They imagined a world where their cruelty demanded action from you, where every defense, every response, every attempt to survive fed into their sense of control. Make the world hear you. They built their dominance on the idea that you would always be reactive, always carrying the weight of their attacks, always invested in proving yourself. Now none of that mattered. Their downfall didn't come from your plotting, your retaliation, or any calculated move on your part. It came from the natural implosion of their own making. You are the chosen one. The community, long complicit in sustaining their cruelty, gradually withdrew, not because of pressure, not because of strategy, but because the environment that enabled cruelty eventually collapses under its own weight. People stop participating, attention wanes, and the carefully constructed illusion of authority and invincibility crumbles. They are left exposed, isolated, and powerless, forced to confront the consequences of a system they built around manipulation and fear. Do it now, because you will not regret it. The devastating reality for them is that their power was never yours to dismantle. It was inherently unsustainable. They relied on borrowed strength, on complicity, on the temporary willingness of others to tolerate or support their behavior. There is no time like the present. When that support evaporated, there was no scaffolding left to hold them up. Every attempt to maintain dominance now only highlights their fragility. Their strategies, their threats, and their attempts at intimidation failed to resonate because the very foundation of their influence, the crowd, the network, the audience, is gone. This is what makes the moment so powerful for you. Show the world what you are made of. Their collapse is entirely self-inflicted. You did not orchestrate it, you did not fight for it, and you did not need to intervene. The universe, human nature, or the simple inevitability of truth delivered the outcome, and you are left standing untouched and undeniable. They see it perhaps with disbelief, perhaps with rage that the very environment they controlled no longer exists to prop them up. Their undoing is permanent, public, and utterly inevitable, and it didn't require you to lift a finger. The irony is ruthless. You are the change you want to see in this world. All along, their own wickedness was the architect of their defeat, and the victory for you was effortless, complete, and absolute. The story is clear, the tide has turned, and the world has quietly corrected itself. This is your call to greatness. Every insult, every manipulation, every attempt to make you feel small has lost its power, not because of confrontation, not because of revenge, but because the foundation that sustained it has collapsed. The community that once cheered for cruelty has withdrawn, leaving the abuser exposed, isolated, and irrelevant. Their borrowed confidence is gone. The time to do this is now. Their influence evaporated, and their reputation has become a cautionary tale, a testament to the fragility of power built on fear and complicity. You didn't need to fight or orchestrate their downfall. You survived, endured, and maintained your integrity while their unsustainable behavior imploded on its own. Their attempts to dominate, intimidate, and isolate you now ricochet back, exposing desperation instead of control. The masks have fallen. You are who you are supposed to be. The empty theaters remain, and the crowd no longer feeds their illusions. The very isolation they once inflicted on you has returned tenfold, permanent and undeniable. What remains is your strength, quiet but absolute. You outlasted the groupthink, survived the cycles of cruelty, and emerged standing while their borrowed authority crumbled. You were born for this. Their downfall is proof that cruelty and manipulation are temporary, while patience, endurance, and integrity are permanent. You are no longer the target. They are the lesson, the warning, and the example of what happens when someone builds their identity on tearing others down. This is more than victory. It's revelation. It's proof that real power doesn't need validation, that endurance outlasts intimidation, and that the universe has a way of exposing the unsustainable. Do not turn back because you are stronger than them. They are defeated. 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 They are